On your Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Toronto Raptors fall to the Miami Heat in a game that showed off the importance of having reliable point guard play. We'll dig into Dennis Schröder's really tough night and whether or not now is the time to look at a starting lineup change, all with Jamar Hinds coming up on today's show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, December the 7th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the website that's busted at Woodley Sean. You can find the show at Locked On Raptors on Instagram, and you can also join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. As always, I've been hyping up the Discord. It's a great place to be. It's my favorite place now to talk about the Toronto Raptors on the internet because the aforementioned website that's busted is no fun anymore. So come hang out. Link is in the description of the podcast. It's free to join. Would love to see you join our little family over there on the Locked On Raptors Discord server. As a reminder, you can also find the show for free wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe, follow, rate, review, etc., to support the show. It's always appreciated when you do that. We are also on YouTube if you want to go and subscribe to the video version of the show each day. Hit the subscribe button, then the little notification bell so you never miss an episode when it goes live. As well, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. And we will get started digging into a 112-103 loss to the Miami Heat on Wednesday night, a game that featured many runs, featured lots of really nice pockets of Raptors basketball, a couple awesome performances from Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, and kind of an insane spiraling meltdown by Dennis Schröder late in this one, among other things, to cost them a chance at winning. Here to break it all down with us, we're going to talk about the starting lineup, which was really bad once again, continuing a very long trend now. We got the good, the bad, and the coming up. Here to do it all is our pal, Jamar Hinds. Jamar, what's going on, pal?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to dive into the second worst game of the season. It's not worse than that Bulls debacle where they were up 17 with 5 minutes left and kept jumping at every DeRozan pump fake and lost in OT. It's not as bad as that. It's a close second in my mind, at least.
Interesting that you have it worse than the Portland Trailblazers game. That's
I know, and I also thought about that because Portland was winless going into that game, but just how it was just the way that this game was lost and the guys that were out with no hero, no Bam. It just, yeah. I understand Miami's always, heat culture or whatever. I always know that. I always understand that, they're going to play you tough regardless, but just the way this game was lost more than the actual loss has me ranking it worse.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there because it felt like a loss that could have been mitigated by a couple of decisions late in this game and a couple of, decisions not given over to Dennis Schröder to make down the stretch of this game as well. I did not love Dennis Schröder's performance in this game. I guess that's where we can start. This game, like I said, Pascal 34-6 on 9 of 13, 11 of 11 at the line, a shame-to-away stat. OG 23-8, and I think I tied for a career high 6 assists for him. 8 of 13, 5 of 10 from deep. You get like a perfect Gary Trent Jr. game, 15, 2 and 2, 3 of 7 from deep off the bench. And yet the game is lost because Dennis Schröder just kind of has a meltdown in the last 5 or 6 minutes of this game. And Darko Rajakovic does not change anything, really. He comes late with the Gary Trent for Jakob Poeltl sub, which I don't think was really the move I would have gone for in that spot. I think it would have been pulling Dennis Schröder as he was just having a really tough night on both ends of the floor. What was your sort of read on the Dennis Schröder performance in this one? He leads the team in shots with 18. He goes 4 of 18 from the field, 5 assists, 3 turnovers, a -6, which I don't think really does justice. What a tough game this was for the Raptors starting point guard.
Well, you mentioned the last 5-6 minutes, but I'm pretty much thought it was the entire game, not just.
I mean, yeah, the whole game was also
five,
bad.
6
We can
minutes.
say that for sure.
But I just felt that there were so many possessions where he just looked for his offense right away.
Yeah.
Even in the first half, he'd go down the court and then immediately try to drive at the rim. It's like no pass. Now the Raptors did have 29 assists in this game, but there was just a lot of times he was just not even initiating anything. He was just going beeline straight to the rim. And normally Dennis is a decent finisher. I haven't had a problem with him finishing at the rim this season. But this game, he was 3 for 11 in the paint. He was 3 for 8 at the rim. And a lot of times, and I just hate this with players in general, where they try to draw the foul as opposed to, and he did this on a couple of his drives. And it's just like, if that's all you're going to do on the possession is just barrel into somebody and try and draw a foul with like no passes, then what's the point? So there was, I'm going to save a particular possession with Dennis for, I'm already ruining this, but I'm going to save a particular possession for Dennis for my bad later in the game.
Perfect.
But yeah, it's just on a night where Pascal and OG, as you already mentioned, 30 and 23. So that's 53 points. Each one of them only took 13 shots.
Yeah.
OG especially brought the Raptors back in the game because remember, the first few minutes were brutal. The Heat just kept making threes. Caleb Martin thought this was the Eastern Conference Finals all over again. And they were down 22-7. It took 2 Darko timeouts to kind of right the ship. OG goes on a personal 8-0 run, kind of brings the Raptors back in it. Pascal has it going for mid-range. He's drawing fouls. He even made a 3, something he hasn't done a lot lately. And all of a sudden, the Raptors are up at halftime. And the game it just, Miami didn't have that much going, especially when they went to their bench options. Aside from, can't say the dude's name, from UCLA.
Jaquez.
Yeah. Aside from him, because, he's been solid all season and he's a really good rookie. But they didn't have that much going on. This is a game that the Raptors, if they just executed better, could have easily won by like 15 points. And that's why I had it ranked as the second worst loss of the season. And I just, on a night like this, it was just very frustrating for me to see Schröder hijack the offense time and time again. And I'm not even getting into the defensive parts because you probably listed it in your list of things that he did wrong in the fourth quarter. But he had 2 possessions. He had two possessions against Duncan Robinson that basically ended the game. The one where it was a 3-point game and he had the closeout, if you can call it a closeout, where he just ran to the side and then Duncan Robinson easily sidestepped him and made the 3, put the Heat up 6. And then he goes again with those one-man possessions, just go straight down the court, miss a layup. Cool. That's awesome. And then right after that, there's a little bit of action at the top. Dennis falls asleep. Duncan cuts, wide open layup, basically game over. So just all in all, and I'm not trying to totally tear down Dennis's season. He's been okay. He's had some games where he's been really good. I remember one podcast a few weeks ago where one of the people commenting was like, "How come you guys are not giving Dennis more credit?" So he's had good games, but a game like this can't happen when it's just it would be different. I'm not saying that Dennis can never take 18 shots in a game. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a time and a place. And when you have 2 of your main options combine 53 points on 26 shots, this is not the time nor the place to take 18 shots. It's just not.
Yeah, it was bad. It was, especially for a team that's trying to figure out what its long-term pieces are going to be around its burgeoning potential superstar in Scottie Barnes. You cannot have Dennis Schröder, who, look, we all know the deal here. He's a stopgap. You cannot have a stopgap taking up the helium in a game where the guys who actually might matter for the long-term outlook for this team are A, cooking, and B, have had stretches of the game where playing with one another with different sets of lineups without Dennis Schröder on the floor were bloody fantastic and got the Raptors back into it. I think, I was disappointed from the lack of a hook for Dennis down the stretch by Darko. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. We're going to talk about the starting lineup coming up. But this, and if it would be one thing if Dennis was offering like a lot of, sort of resistance at the point of attack as a defender, he wasn't. This was a really, really bad defensive game from him. You mentioned the Duncan Robinson stuff, but the Heat were also just like spamming the switches of Dennis Schröder onto Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler was feasting in those matchups. I have the numbers here. Dennis only guarded Jimmy Butler for 7 partial possessions in this game per the NBA.com box score data, and the Heat scored 19 points on those 7 possessions. 19 points. Again, those numbers are always a little bit noisy, but that absolutely checks out and passes the eye test. And his overall defensive contributions of late have just not been there. He's not been that sort of pesky point of attack guy. He's getting hung up on screens. He's falling behind the play. His rotations have not been very good. I was looking at dunks and threes this morning, a great stat site, and they have Dennis as a negative 0.5 estimated defensive box plus minus guy. That's not good. He's in the exact same figure as Damian Lillard and Lauri Markkanen and Sam Hauser, among other guys. Like, he's not been a positive defender this season either. And you're seeing it all build up with the starting lineup issues. It's just been a really, really tough scene. We're going along here, but I want to get to a thing I wanted to get to here. I just wrote some notes down on Dennis Schröder's fourth quarter. I just want to read off verbatim from my notes. There were 4 things here that I had. There were obviously more than that. I missed the Duncan Robinson cut in my notes because by the time I was done with this stretch of notes, I had thrown my phone across the room and was done writing notes on my phone because the game was cooked anyway. But here's what I have. This begins when the score is 97-92. The Raptors are threatening here. I have awful Dennis turnover, all in caps. Drives into traffic when he should have just swung it around the horn. Loads of space on the weak side for OG and Scottie. Misses Yak with a bad pass, turnover. That was the possession where Scottie even looked frustrated because he was on the weak side and nobody guarding him. They're 2 quick passes away from a wide open 3 or Scottie driving against the shifting defense, and they don't get anything out of it because Dennis decides to plunge himself into the thicket of Miami Heat players waiting for him.
More then on I have possession later.
Yeah. Then I have this game is screaming for Gary over Dennis. Thank F. Dennis clanks a 3 and it lands in Scottie's hands. Nice brick assist, 97-94. Then OG huge block on Butler. OMG. Schröder duffs the layup the other way. ... Then I have Dennis ... Insanely dumb closeout. Gives Duncan an easy 3. Then he effing bricks another layup. Lots of expletives in my notes from this stretch of Dennis Schröder play. Not awesome. And it will inform our segment coming up, Jamar, as we're going to dive into the starting lineup, which was miserable last night. Minus 23 in 17 minutes. Is it now finally time to entertain a change for the starting lineup for Darko Rajakovic? We'll get to that in just 1 second. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sports book in all the land. You got to go check them out right now. As the weather gets colder, it's miserable outside. It stinks, but you can warm yourself up with those hot NFL offers over on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Maybe you want to go put a little money on Dennis Schröder's under next time out because perhaps he'll be coming off of the bench. You can go do that. You can do same game parlays, for all the different stats, points, rebounds, assists, etc. Pick your players, pick the stats, and if you get them all right, you're going to win some scratch. You should go and do that right now over at FanDuel if that tickles your fancy at all. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, we continue on here. Jamar Hinds of Raptors Republic, the god of the game recap, is here as we dive into the starting lineup conversation. Before that, just a quick reminder, Locked On Sports 24/7 is our 24/7 YouTube streaming channel, first of its kind, with all of the national Locked On podcasts and the local shows covering the biggest stories around the sports world, running 24 hours a day. Go subscribe and put it on in the background. When you're done watching Locked On Raptors, go just keep that stream in the background. Get all your sports info from all the local experts on the Locked On Network at Locked On Sports Today 24/7. Okay, Jamar, starting lineup. Want some numbers?
Sure.
Okay, like I said before the break, minus 23 in 17 minutes of action together last night. Not very good. Since November the 1st, which is all of the Raptors games except for four. This is starts with the game against the Milwaukee Bucks where the Raptors win. But since November 1st, the Toronto Raptors starting lineup, minus 10.4 net rating. They have been riding the helium of a really good start. That Bulls game where they completely waxed the Bulls with their starters before OG went out. The starting lineup in the game against the Wolves was very good, of course, as well. They've been riding that number for quite a while. Minus 10.4 rating since November the 1st. That is really bad for your most used lineup, and that has brought them down on cleaning the glass to a minus 5 net rating overall for their most used lineup. You simply cannot have that. It's just not going to be a conducive setup to winning. Yesterday on the show, I talked about a little bit how we kind of overvalue maybe the starting lineup just in general conversations, maybe over closing lineups because closing lineups matter more. But the starting lineup has been so bad of late that it is now a thing to be worried about. It is a thing to place value on because it has been a nightmare. Do you think it is time for a change, Jamar? This is, I think, the third straight day we've talked about this, but it ain't going anywhere as long as this whole thing exists. I have my thoughts, but I'm curious, where are you at? And where does Dennis Schröder fall into that? Is it Jakob Poeltl? Is it Dennis to the bench? What's your read on the starting lineup situation for the Raptors?
I think, yes, it is time for a lineup change. And the first change I would make is swapping Schröder for Gary. I would leave Poeltl in for now and see how that works out before I do any further changes. But that would be the first change I would make. First of all, Gary's play is, he had a rough start to the season, but he's playing more consistent. Yeah, he's playing more consistent. He was bringing the Raptors back in the game after they did the whole Jekyll and Hyde thing for the second time of the game in the third quarter, where they had how many turnovers in a row, and they fell behind double digits again, and Gary made back-to-back threes, and all of a sudden it was only a 3-point game going into the fourth. But, Dennis has been okay as a three-point shooter, but Gary is a better three-point shooter, and he would provide more spacing, and that change would also put the ball in the hands of Pascal and Scottie more, who are your two best players. And I feel similar to when Fred was here, I feel like a lot of Scottie being just completely invisible sometimes over the first few quarters has a lot to do with who's initiating the offense and it not being him until he's playing with like a bench lineup or something at the beginning of a fourth quarter and he gets himself into rhythm as he was trying to do again in this game. So I think that could be the solution to getting Scottie off to better starts, because we've seen this for at least a season and a half now. And yeah, I feel Dennis would probably be more free, being more aggressive in, leading the second unit. And also we're talking about a guy who's shifted from the starter to a reserve like his whole career. He
was the runner-up for sixth man of the year in the year. Everyone's like, wow, him and Darko, best buds. Like he was the sixth man on that team with the Thunder.
With the Thunder. Mm-hmm. And then he backed up Jeff Teague, eventually took over for him as a starter. He was a backup with the Lakers, was a backup with the Celtics. So he even talked about it before the season started about how he's comfortable playing in both roles. You're 9-12. You just gave me the numbers on the starting lineup. It feels like a no-brainer to me to make a change. Mm-hmm. I'm fearing, though, that they won't, because Darko, and this is a gift and a curse, he tends to give guys a lot of rope.
Sure.
You already saw it with Malachi Flynn. He didn't have a great start to the season, but he stuck with him, and then Malachi started playing better. By the way, only had 6 minutes last game. This game. It's kind of weird. But I just feel for that reason, he's just going to keep giving rope, although we all know the numbers. And it's just going to come as a detriment to the team.
I will say, last night, watching the post-game press conferences, Darko was asked about the starting lineup, and he did not seem very committal to keeping this group together. He didn't, give them a vote of confidence or anything like that. He was basically, we got to look at what's going on and see if we can fix it. So I'm a little hopeful there that was kind of a little glimmer of, okay, maybe a change is coming here. And to your point,
that felt like a diplomatic answer to me, though. I was like, we're gonna look at it. It didn't feel like
you can read it both ways for sure. I think had it been like hey, this is our starting lineup and we believe in them type of thing, like that would be far more concerning to me, I suppose.
Yeah.
To your point about kind of having Scottie feel the ball, obviously we've seen his energy kind of wax and wane a little bit in these games of late. It's a typical fourth quarter Scottie breakout last night. That was fun to see. But yeah, I think your point of just kind of getting the ball in his hands, that seems to be the thing to kind of unlock him a little bit, right? Even if, and I don't think Scottie's long-term future is as a point guard for this team. I think it's as sort of a do-it-all wing type who can kind of, masquerade in all sorts of spots. But you have to see at least a little bit of, can he do this thing? Can he be the leading driving force of a functional offense? And there's no better time than right now to get that information as you have the clock ticking on Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby and the decisions you have to make with those guys, not to mention Gary Trent Jr. as well. You got to see more of it. I think you owe it to yourself as a team. And right now, it's not like Dennis is covering himself in glory as the creator in this offense. He's leading the team in touches at 79.7. I don't think you should be orienting this version of the team around Dennis Schröder and what he's doing. I think it's a miscalculation of what matters this season. What matters is the information gleaning from the guys who might be around 3, 4, 5 years from now around Scottie Barnes. You have Dennis at 79.7 touches, Scottie at 74.9, Pascal way down at 62.7. They are dispersing those touches how you would want between Scottie and Pascal. But Dennis is kind of doing the thing that everyone thought Fred was doing last year, which was kind of dribbling the ball into the ground and ruining possessions by not creating offense. The difference was Fred had the capacity to hit 32-foot bombs at very important times of games while also not turning it over ever. And you're seeing the difference now between those two players. Right now, Dennis is at 6.2 pick and rolls run per game per NBA.com. It's 38.3% of his touches. He's at 0.87 points per possession as a pick and roll ball handler. It's not very good. It's 51st percentile. Scottie Barnes is at 0.86 points per possession, which is down. I think it's like a season low for him based on, I've been tracking that number quite a bit. Just 2.8 possessions a game, 14.2% of his touches. He needs to run more pick and roll to see what him running more pick and roll looks like. It's too interesting and important a thing to get a look at, to not get a look at. And I think you open that up by moving into the starting point guard spot, bringing Gary in, giving him some space to work with, and having Dennis move to the second unit. I also think it does a couple things to improve the overall game flow for Darko Rajakovic that he can lean on. It moves Dennis to the bench. It probably bumps Malachi from the rotation in lieu of Otto Porter Jr. and Chris Boucher and Precious Achiuwa, which I think is probably the right move for a team that's really struggled defensively of late. And Malachi Flynn, while he's had a couple nice games, has been very quiet of late too. I don't think he's got an iron grip on a rotation spot. It gives you Dennis free reign to run the second unit. And you can also, shout out to Ben in the Discord for this suggestion, it also allows you to change your pattern in the first quarter where you can move Yak out at the 6-minute mark, bring in either Otto or Boucher or Precious, go small with shooting, and Scottie and Pascal and OG kind of running the show with a little more space around them. You can then pair them with Gary Trent Jr., Otto Porter Jr., Gradey Dick, even if you can get him back into the rotation at some point here. Pair those guys with shooters, and then all of a sudden you have a basic standard spread pick and roll offense you can run with your bench, and that's probably going to cook against most other second units between the roll gravity of Yak and Dennis getting downhill against lesser defenders and the shooting that's going to be around them. I think that's a valuable thing. Meanwhile, in the starting five, you open up Scottie Pascal pick and rolls a little bit more often. The inverted versions of those where Scottie can pop or Pascal can, be the short roll guy with Yak working in the dunker spot. That's been effective for them with Gary and OG spacing around them. It allows you to try a bunch of different stuff that is important stuff to see for this team. I think, like you said, it kind of feels like a no-brainer to me. And my hope is that it's an easy conversation to have considering Darko and Dennis's histories. And again, we all know the deal here. Dennis is a stopgap. He's not someone who's going to be long for this team. You cannot make your decisions based on, well, Dennis wants to start, which I'm not saying is even happening, but I just think there's no upside to keeping the starting lineup rolling right now. Their defense has slipped. They're not driving offense the way they were before. And I think, maybe it spectacularly fails with Scottie Barnes as the lead point guard, but that's also important information to get too, right, Jamar?
Yeah. And this is, being year 3, this is kind of what everybody wanted to see in terms of not just giving Scottie the keys per se, but
Mhm.
having him in different roles to see what works best. So there, even if Dennis didn't have the game or the stretch he's had lately, I would still want to see Scottie starting at point at some point just to see how it would look. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to go into year 4 of these questions about, can Scottie run an offense at the point like on a full-time basis or stuff like that. I kind of want to get those answers now, especially when the Raptors are under 500. You don't have to
Yep.
ask the question, oh, is this going to affect winning for the next 2 weeks or something like that? Because they're not winning like that. This
Mhm.
would be the perfect time to just tinker a little bit. And I like that idea from Ben in the Discord, especially
Mhm.
implementing going small. And you don't have to have the same starting lineup. You could have a fluid lineup where there's changes. They even go back to the 2019 championship season. There were some games where JV started. There were some games where Ibaka started. It was matchup
Mhm.
depending. So you don't have to roll out the same starting five every single game. I don't believe in that.
The Raptors starting lineup is the second most used lineup in all of basketball right now per Clean the Glass. That's crazy. It's not a good lineup. They're losing minutes quite handedly. They're in the 31st percentile of lineups, and they're the second most used lineup in basketball.
Yeah.
It's noted as well. The number one most used lineup in basketball features Fred VanVleet, and they're a plus 11 per 100 possessions. So, yeah. We'll come back on the other side. We'll get to the good, the bad, and the to round out today's episode of the show. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks, the single best place for you to go and play daily fantasy sports. You want to check them out because they are just doing daily fantasy the way it should be. It's not you against some expert in a basement that you have no idea what you're even dealing with, what matchup you're looking at, what their team is looking like. No, it's just you against the projections. And all you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players and whether they will get more or less than their projection via Prize Picks in a given stat. If you get all 6 right, you can win up to 25 times your money. That is pretty sweet. And right now, it's not just basketball. With the basketball season here and football season ongoing, you can now do combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. So you can combine projections for receptions and also points scored for any of your favorite NFL and NBA stars. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have someone get hurt in the first half of the game that doesn't return, then that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to 100 bones. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, rounding out the show here with Jamar. I feel like it's been a hot episode. We're the juices are flowing, baby. That was a very irritating loss. I think in part because it kind of showed what some of the upside can be when things are kind of humming, and they kind of let it all fall apart. Let's get to the good, the bad, and the There was some good from this game. What did you have for your good from this game, Jamar?
This might have been the quietest 30-point game of Pascal Siakam's career. I didn't
Yeah,
even know he
pretty
had 30
tight.
points until I looked at the box score. To be honest, I didn't know. I thought, honestly, if I watched the game again and someone told me that Pascal had like 18 points, 20 points, I'd have been like, yeah, that seems to check out.
Mhm.
But no, he had a stretch, like I said earlier, in the second quarter that really helped the Raptors get back in the game. He was cooking in the mid-range. He was drawing fouls. He shot 11 for 11 from the line. And that is very noteworthy because the Raptors are the second worst free throw shooting team in the league. Only Denver's worst, surprisingly, is Denver. But yeah, they're the second worst free throw shooting team, so you can't sneeze at 11 for 11. I thought Pascal had a really good game. I thought he should have got the ball more. I thought OG should have got the ball more, but we've talked ad nauseum as to why.
Yes, loved Pascal's game. By the way, the positive regression to the mean began last night. 1 of 1 from deep. He's now at 21% from 3 on the season. Baby steps, baby. My good. Otto Porter Jr.'s scoreless 14 minutes of just simply being an adult on the floor offered great defensive integrity. Obviously, teams got to worry about him as a spacer. Didn't hit his shots in this game. Don't care. Otto Porter Jr. is an agent for good when he is on the court. A plus 14 in his 14 minutes. If he starts hitting some of those threes as well, it only gets better. And I was very encouraged after the game as well. Speaking of Darko, what he was saying after the game, things we can maybe take, as sort of progress or positivity going forward. He talked about Otto having a really good week of conditioning with the time off, and that he'll probably be part of the mix going forward outside of the odd rest day here and there. Said it's been a really good week for Otto, kind of getting back up to the speed of things, which is great to hear because Otto Porter Jr. is very effective when he plays. What was your bad from this game? You had a specific possession you highlighted. What was that possession?
Yes, and you brought it up a little bit earlier, so I'm actually going to add a second bad, but
Beauty.
I'll go to that possession first. Yeah, it was the 97-92 possession with 4.5 minutes left. Pascal had the ball first. He was in the corner. He gets trapped by Lowry and Duncan Robinson. Miami had two guys on Siakam, which means somebody's open, and that was Scottie in this possession. So that was just a very frustrating possession. And to be honest, I've never heard Matt Devlin specifically, because he's just Mr. Positivity. Even if the Raptors are down 25 with 3 minutes left, he's like, if you could just string two stops together or something like that. That's always Matt Devlin. Gotta love him for that. And Jack Armstrong, both of them were highly critical of Dennis in this game. Jack can be critical at times, but I've never seen Matt Devlin consistently mentioning something negative about a player. So that's your ultimate barometer on how somebody's playing, right? Now, my second bad is that beginning of the third quarter, man.
Yeah.
Remember, the Raptors were up 2 at halftime. And then they went on a drought for 6 minutes and 26 seconds. They had 6 turnovers alone. And this is not even something we could blame Dennis for. This was everybody. Everybody was just, I don't know what the hell they were doing. And yeah, Miami went on a 16-0 run just like that. And all of a sudden they were back up double digits. And the Raptors, after working so hard to get back in the game in the first half, had to do it again. And they did in the second half, because they eventually tied the game before everything went to hell in the last 5 minutes. But it's just, how do you come out of halftime like that? They only had 14 turnovers in the game, but that 6 minute stretch alone, they had 6 turnovers.
Yeah, it was a mess.
And there were live ball turnovers.
Ugly.
It's not like passes sailing out of bounds or something. There was one charge where Lowry, I don't even understand that charge, to be honest, but I guess it's Lowry, so it's a reputation call. But most of these were live ball turnovers, which is obviously the worst type of turnover. And yeah, it was just, you can't, and again, it's just adding to the woes of the starting lineup, but you can't come out of the half like that. Like, how did the switch get flipped off that badly, where you were playing pretty well going into halftime, and then all of a sudden it's like you forgot how to play basketball in 15 minutes?
This was kind of thing I was thinking about last night. It's got to be kind of daunting to coach against Eric Spoelstra for the first time, because that dude is constantly changing things up, and you got to be like lightning quick with adjustments. And I wonder if maybe that was sort of a welcome to the NBA moment, if you will, for Darko Rajakovic, because like the Heat were very clearly changing up their coverages. They were sending doubles more aggressively. The sort of game plan seemed like it was tilted on its head. And I wonder if that's just a case of, wow, Spo's really good, and Darko wasn't quite ready for the Spo wave in that third quarter. My bad. Look, we've talked a lot about stuff we wish Darko did in this game. I kind of think the worst thing Darko's done all season long is the 3-game winning streak dinner promise, or at least allowing that to get public.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
And look, this is the thing. It's possible. I think this is actually the case. I think Darko is just like a truly earnest, genuine, extremely nice man who, in this garbage world we live in, is going to have that weaponized against him, because no one can just like accept like, oh, this guy's just really nice and like earnest and like wants to support his team with nice things. I think this is just a cold, cold world for extremely genuine and earnest people, I think. And so I feel bad a little bit that like a very nice seeming thing has kind of gotten turned into this point of, wow, the Raptors are embarrassing. But the cherry was put on top of the cake when the Miami Heat posted on their Twitter, "Don't worry, team dinner's on us tonight," with a clip, I think from like Below Deck or some show I haven't seen. Yeah, you go look at it on the Heat's Twitter. It'll get you. I love Darko. He seems just like a genuinely lovely person that just might not be, up to speed with how the world typically treats genuine, nice people. This is a world like everyone could stand to be 5% more like Darko, but instead we're going to make fun of these silly little things. It's definitely the most Charlie Montoyo thing he's done so far as the head coach of the Raptors. I'll say that. Love you, Darko. It's a learning process for everybody. Let's quickly get to that. What you got for your
I'm actually gonna go to the 905 on this one.
Okay.
Kind of weird because Grady's had he's strung together a few good games.
He's popping off, baby.
So I'm interested to see when he would be implemented back in the lineup, and if he is, how he would be implemented back in the lineup. So, obviously the last time I was on this pod, I was saying, is it time for him to go to the 905 to get some more reps in since he just came off a DNP? The next day it happened. So maybe we'll see, how it works out now if they try to bring him back or they just keep him there for a little bit longer. We'll see.
The way for him to be implemented to me is in a lineup with Gary, Pascal, Scottie, and OG. Just go full shooting and full youth movement and full the future, baby. I am on board with that. Also, like I said earlier, sprinkle them into some bench lineups with Dennis and Yak as your backbone. That would be pretty cool to me as well. My is tied into that. In lieu of Gradey Dick, Otto Porter Jr. played with that foursome of players for a brief moment in this game. And boy, was it a banger of a lineup for a hot second. It was part of the 8-0 run that closed the third quarter to get the Raptors back very close in this one. And, I talked about it yesterday with Katie. They simply need to get more minutes with the big three plus Gary. They got a bit more of it last night, and they've improved their overall numbers to a plus 35.6 net rating in 76 possessions together, which is simply not enough. We got to see more of it. And Otto Porter Jr. as the fifth guy in those groups, that's all right with me. I would love to see more of that. And it's a shame they didn't go back to that lineup that totally swung the game for them in the third quarter at any point in the fourth. But alas, we've complained enough. Ultimately, some fun stuff from this game, some things to grow on, some things to get angry about. But is there a chance that this is a blessing in disguise game where it was such a bad night for Dennis and the starters, such a good game for Gary and Otto and the Gary plus the three guys lineups? Maybe it is the thing that forces their hand to change up their starting lineup and alter their rotations a little bit. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is the loss that sparks the return of the good Raptors for the rest of the season. We shall see if that plays out. Jamar, this was fun. Thanks so much for hanging out, buddy. You got anything you want to plug?
My typical follow, Jamar BH on Twitter. I have a recap to this game if you want to see a little bit more complaining, if you want to read a little bit more complaining. I have videos and writing, so whatever tickles your fancy, it's there. I also have a preview of the Hornets game tomorrow. No LaMelo Ball for a little while, which is kind of a shame because I thought he was playing the best basketball of his career before he injured his ankle again. Might need to talk to Steph Curry and Under Armour about shoes or something because it keeps happening and he's too talented to constantly be out of the lineup. So a little bit bummed about that.
Yeah, not necessarily a must-win, but certainly a can't-lose game for the Raptors on Friday. That would stink. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please follow, subscribe to, rate, review, support the show however you can. It's much appreciated as always. We'll be back again tomorrow with guest TBD, but we are going to dig into the 10-year anniversary of the Rudy Gay trade. And are there any parallels we can draw between the 2013-14 Raptors and this Raptors team now existing 10 years later? We will do all of that tomorrow. Until then, thanks so much for hanging. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.